Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. I'm Katie Earle, and I coordinate our University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're here with Rick Falkowski. Welcome, Rick.
Good to be here.
As always, virtually, we appreciate you doing this. And everyone who's on, we appreciate you. So, quick housekeeping here for our new folks. We are recording the session, and I'll try to post that on our website in the near future. You are muted and without your video showing, and those are just the settings for our program today. So we'll be communicating with you through our Q&A panel. I know some of you have already found it, and if you are new to us, it's located at the lower right-hand side of your screen if you're on a computer. Click on that to expand it. Then if you're on a tablet or smartphone, touch your screen. That brings up your control panel. You'll see a circle with 3 dots. Click on that, and there you'll find your Q&A. So we'd like to thank our sponsors, which is my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all their support. And Senior Services is at 858-8526 if you ever need anything. All right, the star of our show. Rick Falkowski has been involved in all aspects of Western New York entertainment during the past 50 years. He is the founder of the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame and Buffalo Music Awards, is the former publisher of Buffalo Backstage Magazine, the entertainment coordinator of Tonawana's Gateway Harbor Concerts, and former representative of the American Society of Authors, Composers, and Publishers, and a Time Warner retiree. He presents classes on the history of Buffalo music and entertainment and Buffalo histories at libraries, community centers, and for various organizations like ours. Thank you, Rick. In addition, Rick is the author of History of Buffalo Music and Entertainment, and in October 2019 released his second book, Profiles, Volume 1, Historic and Influential People from Buffalo and Western New York, the 1800s. He's currently researching, conducting interviews, and compiling information for his next book, Profiles, Volume 2, Historic and Influential People from Buffalo and Western New York, the 1900s, scheduled for publication this August. All right, Rick, thank you for being here. The virtual floor is yours.
Hey, thank you very much. Glad to be here, everybody. And yes, today we're going to be talking about the history of rock and roll in Buffalo. Now, this comes from my book, History of Buffalo Music and Entertainment. And if anybody has that book, and if you don't have it, I think it's a very good idea to go out and purchase a copy, it goes back all the way to the 1800s. So my talk on this book is broken down into 2 separate presentations. The first one covers the early history, and then the second one is I call Rock and Roll Buffalo. A little bit of background, before we go backwards, just to touch on the early days. Here's some of the early theaters that used to be in the Buffalo area. Going back to legitimate theater and also vaudeville theaters and also your first movie theaters in the Buffalo area. In addition to all the theaters, we had fantastic nightclubs in Buffalo during the early 1900s. We had McVan's, you had the Town Casino, Ann Montgomery's, Crystal Beach Ballroom. There's a picture over there of Harold Arlen right in the Crystal Beach boat. And of course, the Delwood Ballroom. And classical music goes all the way back in Buffalo. Used to have music at the Elmwood Music Hall. That's on the corner of like Elmwood and Virginia, which is now a parking lot for Payless Shoes. And you also had music inside the Broadway barn, which is now where they keep the snow plows. There actually used to be music there. And early radio. Buffalo was one of the first places in New York State to have radio. First station was WGR, and they used to have live bands play inside the radio stations. And of course, Fran Stryker from Buffalo was on WEBR, and he premiered The Lone Ranger on the radio here in Buffalo. And on WBEN, you had Buffalo Bob Smith, who later went on to do the Howdy Doody Show. Well, all the big band music and everything like that really premiered and peaked at the Delwood Ballroom. The Delwood was on the corner of Elmwood and Utica, here in west side or upper west side of Buffalo. And here's what your dance floor was totally packed. That's the Crystal Beach Ballroom right there in the bottom left. And then the pictures on the top right and bottom right are the Delwood. Well, the Delwood Ballroom used to have something called the High Teen Club. And the High Teen Club started out by playing all the big band music. Well, as time went on, the big band music ended up changing to rock and roll music. Well, they had a live show the High Teen Club that was broadcast from the Delwood on Saturday afternoons. And they heard about this in other cities because it was the third top rated radio program in all of the United States. So they sent a disc jockey from Philadelphia to Buffalo to see what was the big thing about all these people dancing to rock and roll music at the Delwood Ballroom. And the guy came there, and at first he thought it was a little cheesy, but then he saw how much fun everybody was having. He ended up taking the concept of that show back to Philadelphia, and he started a show called the Ted Horn Bandstand. And that ended up becoming, you know it, Dick Clark's American Bandstand. So truthfully, the beginning of American Bandstand, the show that all of us, when we were kids, came home from school and had to watch, see what the latest songs were, actually had its origins right here in Buffalo. Of course, it wasn't called that, but the guy got the idea. And so that's where we begin rock and roll here in Buffalo, New York. Now, the person that started rock and roll on the radio in Buffalo was a guy by the name of Hound Dog Lorenz. Now, he actually started playing rock and roll all the way back in 1948 on WJJL. And he went to Cleveland, where he was on radio with a guy by the name of Alan Freed. And together with Hound Dog Lorenz and Alan Freed, Cleveland calls itself the home of rock and roll because rock and roll music was played on the radio. And that's one of the reasons why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame happens to be in Cleveland. Well, he came back to Buffalo, and he used to do his show on WKBW radio from 7 to 10 every night from the front window at the Club Zanzibar on William Street. And when he came back to Buffalo, Alan Freed went to New York City. Alan did national concerts in New York City, but Hound Dog did all these rock and roll shows in upstate New York. Here's an example. Here's him presenting Elvis Presley at the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium in 1957. Okay. Now, how many of you ended up seeing the Buddy Holly movie? In that movie, there was this one scene where there was a disc jockey that played the same song over and over again. It was a Buddy Holly song. Well, that really didn't happen. That was based off something that happened right here in Buffalo. There was a disc jockey named Tom Clay, also known as Guy King, who on July 3rd in 1955 climbed out of the window in Shelton Square and started playing Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley over and over and over again. And he asked everybody in Buffalo to come to downtown Buffalo and come to Shelton Square and blow their horn to support the music that he was playing. Well, eventually he caused a huge traffic jam, okay? And the police came and arrested him. Did he get in trouble with the radio station? Not at all. Radio station was pleased. You couldn't have better promotion than that. Well, somebody else, a guy named Danny Neverth, who I'm sure we all remember, and he moved all of our fannies every morning. He actually put a band up on top of the roof of the WBNY studios on Main and Mohawk. So the Beatles weren't the first band to play on top of a roof. It was really the Toon Rockers from Buffalo. And Danny was up on the roof. Of course, did Danny get in trouble for doing that also when everybody stopped? Not at all. It was a great PR stunt, and nobody would ever complain about anything Danny Neverth does. And talking about the early radio days, WBNY was the first radio station in Western New York that played consistent rock and roll music. They had a disc jockey by the name of Dick Lawrence. Previously, the stations like Hound Dog Lorenz, that would just be one segment of the show with rock and roll. So here's some of your early DJs in Buffalo. You got Joey Reynolds up there in the top left. And on the right, that's actually Danny Neverth, very young Danny Neverth. And on the left, you have Tommy Shannon. And if you're familiar with Tommy, recently passed away at his home in California, recently. And what the radio stations did to promote their shows was have record hops. And the record hops were also called sock hops. And how did sock hops get their name? Well, the dances were always at the gyms, as you can see everybody dancing here on the gym floors. And the gym teachers, and we know what they were like, always keeping the rules, didn't want people to scuff up their basketball court floors. So they made everybody take their shoes off. So everybody was dancing without their shoes. Subsequently, the dances inside the gyms became known as sock hops. But WKBW radio actually became one of the most powerful radio stations in the eastern United States. You know, with their 50,000 watts, you could hear their signal all the way from Newfoundland to Florida. In fact, Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles, knew the power of KB radio because it was said if a song was played on KB on Sunday, it could become a hit by the end of the week just because people heard it all over the East Coast. So Brian Epstein asked KB Radio if they could have the Beatles play in Buffalo's Memorial Auditorium the day after the Ed Sullivan Show. The promoters for that show would have been Danny Everett and Joey Reynolds. Well, they turned it down because at that time, the Beatles were, according to them, an unknown British band. And this was February. Who wants to go to downtown Buffalo in the middle of February? And it would have been a Monday night. So they said, nah, we're not interested. And so Danny Nevers has said personally, he might move your fanny in the morning, but he was kicking himself in the fanny because he turned down the show, which would have cost him $3,500. Can you imagine what would have happened? And it would have been historic. Buffalo would have been the first place that the Beatles played in the United States. The concert ended up being held in Pittsburgh. It sold out in like 20 minutes. Okay, so Buffalo didn't go down in rock and roll history because of that. Now, one other thing that happened in early radio in Buffalo, you might remember this, is on Halloween of 1968, Jeff Kay broadcast a reenactment of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. And they redid it using local places. And this is no lie. I was driving down Harlem Road and I was looking to the north because they said that the aliens had exploded all the gas tanks in Tonawanda next to Grand Island. Well, it really didn't happen. But this is actually considered one of the most historic moments in radio, not just in Buffalo, nationally, because the government of Canada actually sent troops to the Peace Bridge to try to stop the aliens from coming into Canada because they even thought they were there. You know, fun times, I'll tell you. And the first band in Buffalo, really, to make it music-wise was a group called the Toon Rockers. I'd mentioned Dick Lawrence, who was the program director at WBNY. Well, they were practicing one day, and the guitarist went down the strings and went making really funny sounds on the strings. And Dick said, "Wow, that sounds great." So they recorded it, and they named the song "Green Mosquito" because Lawrence thought it sounded like a mosquito. Well, they ended up releasing that song, and it ended up reaching number 42 on the charts. And here's a picture of them playing on Dick Clark's Beach Nut Show, which is something they did along with American Bandstand. And the Toon Rockers were also one of the first bands that played at the record hops and actually played their own instruments. Previous to that, people would come to the record hops and lip sync the songs or make believe they were playing their instruments. But the Toon Rockers actually played their own songs, and Ed Bentley was with them. And Ed's from Buffalo, and he's a member of the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. Now, the first band to really have a big, big hit in Buffalo was the Rockin' Rebels. Now, we mentioned Tommy Shannon. Tommy Shannon had a theme song, and if you remember it, it went, Tommy Shannon Show, KB Radio. Well, Tommy Shannon heard the Rockin' Rebels playing, and he asked them to come into the recording studio and record something. So they were waiting and waiting, and the sax player started playing an instrumental version of the Tommy Shannon Show. That became the song Wild Weekend, which ended up about 8 months later becoming the #1 song in the country. It was the first million-selling song. But by then, the Rockin' Rebels had broken up. Okay, so Tommy Shannon owned the rights to the song. He wrote the song. So he had other bands going around the country making believe they were the Rockin' Rebels, and they were playing these songs. So once again, like at the sock hops, the bands didn't get paid much money. They did it for promotion, you know. And so Tommy is the one that really made all the money off the song. But Rockin' Rebels, they are still performing. The Kipler brothers, twins, still play in the Buffalo area. There was a guy by the name of Ursel Hickey. Now, that picture of him that you can see right here is considered one of the most iconic photos of what early rock and roll was like. In fact, when Billboard magazine, Rolling Stone, I mean, did a history of rock and roll in 1976, they used that as the front cover photo. Well, Ursula was from Buffalo. This picture was taken right at a photography studio in Maine near Chippewa. And Ursula was famous for his song called Bluebirds Over the Mountain. It peaked at number 75. It was re-recorded by the Beach Boys, and they also had a hit with it. But the other reason that song was so important, till this day, it's the shortest song ever to be in the top 100 on the record charts. It was only 1 minute and 24 seconds long. Now, everybody knows about Ramblin' Lou. You know, Ramblin' Lou did everything with country, but Ramblin' Lou actually started out doing rock and roll shows in Niagara Falls. You can see here at the State Theater, he used to have shows, and here he is, Jerry Lee Lewis, performing there. But with his country shows that Ramblin' Lou had, they found a live recording of Hank Williams, the famous country singer, not Hank Williams Jr., the original, real Hank Williams. And they found the tape. Time Life found it, and they contacted Ramblin' Lou and said, "Can we release this as a record?" So, you know, Buffalo's such a great place. The only place they found a live recording of Hank Williams happened to be where? Right here in the Buffalo area. Now, in the West New York area, there was really two types of bands. There were bands called the Buffalo Sound, and there were the Teen Clubs band. The Buffalo Sound bands were the bands that played, you know, music like Hound Dog Lorenz used to play, because the Hound played the original black recordings of the songs, not the white remakes, which were totally mellowed down. And so there was a guy named Stan Celeste from Buffalo. And Stan ended up going up to Toronto when he was 17 years old and played with a group called Ronnie Hopkins and the Hawks. And if you look at the names there, you have Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm. Yes, this is the group of musicians that ended up becoming the band. And we mean the band that backed up Bob Dylan. And Stan was the original keyboardist in that group. Now here's a picture of Stan and the Ravens playing at a club where they were really popular called Lulu Bells. And that was in the east side of Buffalo. And they also used to play at the Hideaway, which was located on East Elvin across from the stamping plant. Now, there was also a band, very early band from the Buffalo area called the Vibratos. And the Vibratos were the first band to play at the Inferno at Glen Park. We'll talk a little bit about the Inferno later. But they had a singer that performed with them called Emil Lewandowski. And everybody knows Emil Lewandowski. There's a picture of Emil playing guitar on his couch at his home on the east side of Buffalo when he was like 16 or 17 years old. Well, Emil ended up leaving the Vibratos and formed a group called the Enemies and moved to California. And he actually had an audition for the Monkees, and he toured backing up Sonny and Cher with his band, the Enemies. Well, he put a group together in California, and everybody knows Emil Lewandowski, but you know him by the name that he became. He changed his name to Cory Wells. And of course, Cory was the founder of the band Three Dog Night, who really in the late 60s, early 70s had the most number one songs of any recording group. Very, very popular in the Buffalo area was the Rising Sons. And all the members of the Rising Sons became members of Raven. Well, a couple members were from the Rising Sons, and they joined forces with people that played with Stan Celeste Band. And here's a picture of Raven playing at the Fillmore East. And they used to play at a club called Steve Paul's The Scene in New York City. And this one guitarist used to come in and sit in with them. And he was pretty good. You know, everybody liked him. And his name was Jimi Hendrix. So Hendrix always sat in with Raven when they played at the Scene. George Harrison came to see Raven at the Scene, and he thought they were the best band, the best American band that he ever heard. He tried signing them to the Beatles' Apple Records label. Jimi Hendrix said, "Nah, don't sign with them. Sign with Columbia, sign with the US label." So the Raven would have been one of the first bands on Apple Records, but George Harrison loved them. Jimi Hendrix talked out of it. Now here's a picture of the guys from Raven. Sure you remember them, like J.R. Whites was the guitarist. Okay, and he went on to become an inventor and doing a whole bunch of other things with music. Jimmy Cleary played with the band America. Tommy Calandra had BCMK recording studios here in Buffalo. He was really responsible for a lot of the original scene that we'll talk about later. The drummer, Gary Melbar, was the drummer for Steve Miller. In fact, he co-wrote a lot of Steve Miller's songs, and Gary's one of the only people, he's in 3 different bands that were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that's Tony Gallo on the far right. He still is one of the top wedding performers and party performers in California. And he comes to Buffalo once. They played at the Inferno. Okay, the Inferno was at Glen Park. And they originally had shows there. That's where Sammy Davis Jr. got his start and everything, but it became a rock club. Interesting story about Raven is J.R. Whites was only 17 years old when they were playing at the Inferno. The owner of the club found out he wasn't 18 years old, because you remember back then, the drinking age was 18. So J.R. Whites had to play inside of his car. They had a real long cord in the speaker, and he'd be playing inside of his car while the band was playing inside of the club. When he turned 18, he finally ended up being able to play inside of the club. And they were playing in another club called the Ivanhoe. And once again, JR wasn't 18 years old. So he was set up in the basement right below, and he had a microphone down there because he did the backup vocals along with Tony. But right next to where he was set up was a bathroom in the basement. And in between songs, he flushed the toilet, and it ended up coming through the entire PA system. And the owner says, "Damn it, it's JR down in the basement. I told him he can't play there until he's 18 years old." But I have a vendetta against the Inferno. I was born in 1951, and it closed before I turned 18 years old. I had one of the best false sheriff's cards ever made, and they took it away from me. And so I never had the opportunity to perform at the Glen Casino because they took my sheriff's card. Now, I'm sure nobody out there had a false sheriff's card. Well, anyway, you can see the Inferno burned down in 1968. So I was only 17 then. And the band that was in there that day was Barbara St. Clair and the Pincushions. All their equipment was destroyed by fire. Okay. And guitarist in that group was John Culbertson Mahoney, who you may remember. He recorded a whole bunch of popular songs in Buffalo. Well, they had a benefit for them because they lost everything in the fire. Now, rock music was really big, but this is Buffalo. We have to admit there was also something called polka music that happened in Buffalo. There was a very unique club called Chopin Singing Society. It was on Kosciuszko Street. And there's Judge Ann Michael, being held by some people at a celebration there. And her husband were 2 of the people on the board. But what was interesting about Chopin's is they used to have rock bands playing in the front room and polka bands playing in the back room. And so it was one of the clubs that actually put polka and rock together. Okay. Other popular clubs, you had Club Broadway, which is also on Broadway, not far away from Chopin's. Crew Brothers were popular. And of course, Wanda and Stephanie, the Polish Sweethearts, they had a big #1 song, in polka music. In addition to polka, we also had folk music in Buffalo. Okay, a guy by the name of Jerry Raven he did music at the Rue Franklin. And the Limelight was right across the street from the old library, Grosinger Library. And so folk was huge here. And here's a picture of Jerry with his band back in the 1950s. And a lot of musicians from Buffalo ended up making it because they were backup musicians. In other words, it wasn't a whole band that got popular. Like we mentioned, Gary Melbar. He was one of the most recorded drummers in rock music. There was something called the Wrecking Crew. And the Wrecking Crew was a group of people that recorded songs. And they were involved with Phil Spector, which they ended up calling the Wall of Sound. Well, it was a guitarist from Buffalo, Tommy Tedesco. You can see pictured there. And he was from Niagara Falls. He played in jazz groups in Buffalo. He ended up going out to California. And he is the most recorded guitarist in rock and roll history. If you hear songs by the Beach Boys, the surf sound on the guitar, that was Tommy Tedesco that was playing them guitar solos. He also recorded on songs with Elvis, the Byrds, Frank Sinatra. In fact, some of your instrumental theme songs, he recorded the guitar part on the theme from Bonanza, Twilight Zone, and of course Batman, if you remember that one. Do 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 do. That was Tommy Tedesco from Buffalo. Okay. And Nino Tempo and April Stevens. Nino was also a sax player in the Wrecking Crew. And him and his sister got together and they had the #1 Grammy winning song Deep Purple all the way back in 1963. Well, during the 1960s, baby boomers were the biggest portion of the population in the Western New York area. And there was all sorts of things happening for the teens, for the baby boomers. Okay, KB Radio used to have something called the KB Fun Affair. And here's a picture of the KB Fun Affair. You can see there was national groups performing there. Like here in the schedule, you can see Roy Orbison was there. There was a band from Delvin, New York called the Free Design. They performed there, and they had a big hit called Kites Are Fun. And I love this picture of the mods over here. Because look at them, that is the stereotype what your teen band ended up looking like in the Buffalo area. In fact, one of the most popular of the teen bands was a band called the Rogues. The Rogues ended up playing dances because there were teen dances at the Inferno. And then they opened up Club Commodore on Genesee Street. And the Rogues always used to play there. They had Train Kept Rolling was a single that they released. And their guitarist, Michael Spriggs, is one of the top session guitarists in Nashville till this day, playing country music. And there were teen clubs all over the place, okay? Like there was a place called the Volcano. Here's Tweeds performing at the Volcano. And yes, that guy in the front is a 12-year-old Dave Constantino. We'll talk about Dave a little bit later. And at the Pit in Blaisdell, that was a real popular club. And there was a band there called the Cavemen. The names of the bands in the 60s is fantastic. And there was one group that became very popular in the Buffalo area. And they were a conglomeration of people from different bands called the Six Pack, Just Us Five, the Rockin' Paramounts, Caesar and the Romans, and the Madmen. They ended up forming a group called The Road. And here's some pictures of The Road. And here they are playing at a club called Psychus. And a later version of the band, one in the bottom right-hand corner, included Kenny Kaufman and Bobby LaBelle. Now, if the name Kenny Kaufman sounds familiar, he's a great piano player from Buffalo. He's the main jingle writer in Buffalo. He wrote like Tops Never Stops and Solino and Barnes. And I always joke that because of Ken Kaufman, I ended up retiring early from my job at the cable company. Because every day when I was going to work, I kept hearing this one jingle over and over again. And I just couldn't take it anymore. I don't know if you feel the same way. Kenny Kaufman's the person that wrote Hamburg Overhead Door. Well, don't hold it against him. He's also the keyboardist at Sabres games and also did Blue Jays games up in Toronto and stuff like that. But right now the Blue Jays are playing in Buffalo. I don't know if Kenny's playing at the Buffalo, stadium, but he did the games up there. There's a couple of the other popular bands from the 60s, the Twigs, the Invictas. They had the big hit, The Hump, the Hard Times. In front, there's Dick Bowerly, that's Tom Bowerly's brother, and a group called Weekend Trip. Now, McVan's was a very, very popular club for floor shows back in 1930s and 1940s. In fact, during Prohibition, they always said that they smuggled whiskey over from Canada to the basement of McVan's and they distributed it to all the other bars in Western New York. Now, I'm sure that didn't happen because there's no way people in Western New York would smuggle in whiskey and beer during Prohibition. But anyways, McVan's ended up switching over to becoming a rock club. And Joey D and the Starlighters performed there in 1965. And at that show, Jimi Hendrix, he wasn't known as Jimi Hendrix then, I think he was still Jimmy James, was the lead guitarist. So Jimi Hendrix played at McVan's. McVan's, of course, has been torn down and it's now a delicatessen. But if you're driving from downtown Buffalo and you're going towards like Grand Island, look to the right-hand side and you're going to see a 7-Eleven. And right near, I think, where the beer, cold beer is sold inside of there is where Jimi Hendrix played on stage. Every once in a while, I bow down when I pass the building. Another popular band that played at McVan's on a regular basis was Rodin. Now, Rodin's drummer was Teddy Reinhardt, one of the greatest drummers ever from Buffalo. And Genesis was playing in Buffalo. And around that time, Phil Collins was going to stop being the drummer and vocalist in Genesis and just be the lead singer. They actually came to McVan's and asked Ted Reinhardt if he wanted to join Genesis. Teddy ended up deciding to stay in Buffalo. Of course, he was in one of the founding members of Spyro Gyro, and he was then with the band Gamelan, which is very popular. Other popular bands that played at McVan's were Rasputin, one of the first Kiss impersonator bands in the country, and Mark Freeland's band, Pegasus performed there. There's a picture of Mark and people that worked with him back when they were teenagers. And also a group called Black Sheep used to play at McVan's on a regular basis. The lead singer of Black Sheep was Lou Grammatico, who ended up changing his name to Lou Gramm and became a member of Foreigner. Two members of that group, Ron Rocco and Donnie Mancuso, ended up forming the band Cheater, which played around in Buffalo. And of course, since Hendrix played at McVan's, one of the popular draws there was Diamond X. That was a Jimi Hendrix tribute band that played there. And this group actually, I do the Gateway concerts. We're going to have a Woodstock Revisited show this year. And they're actually going to be performing it. That's going to be the first Saturday of August, recreating the Jimi Hendrix show that they did, about 45 years ago at McVan's. Okay, McVan's is also known for original music. Here's some of the bands that also played there: The Enemies, Third Floor Strangers, Mark Freeland, along with Kent Weber, and The Factor. In 1970, the Allman Brothers were first beginning to become a popular band. They had done like a year and a half tour, traveling all around the country. And they had a job at Aliotta's, a very popular club on Hurdle Avenue back in late 60s, early 70s. And they ended up starting a little late. And after the band finished playing, the road manager from the Allman Brothers, his name was Tweeds London, got into an argument with Mr. Aliotta, the owner of Aliotta's, and he ended up stabbing him. Mr. Aliotta ended up dying, from being stabbed. Well, he ended up getting an attorney from Buffalo, John Condon, and he came up with a very interesting defense. He said that the band was on tour for like 18 months, and he was suffering temporary insanity induced by the burnout of rock and roll. So he ended up getting off with time served. And the Allman Brothers were so impressed with Mr. Condon's work that Greg Allman actually hired him as attorney. And Greg used to come to Buffalo on a regular basis to confer with his attorney. And here's a picture of him with Cher backstage at a Canisius High School concert. It couldn't be said then, but it can be said now. The other reason that Greg Allman was always coming to Buffalo is he was outpatient of the Bryland Clinic. That explains, why he was always in Buffalo. A real popular club, other than Aliotta's and the Hurdle Bars and McVan's, was a place called the Bell Star, which is all the way in Colden, New York. This is way out in the middle of the place. Okay. And you have to go around all these curvy roads and everything, but it would be packed. There was national groups playing there all the time. Muddy Waters used to play there. B.B. King used to play there. It was a fantastic place. With today's driving laws, I'm sure, the club never would have made it. But anyways, here's some of the bands that used to play on a regular basis, like Ash and Compagna, the House Rockers, Billy Bright Band, that's Billy McGuinn, Stone Country, that's Dwayne, who still owns the Sportsman's today, Blue Ox. Well, the club ended up burning down on August 20th, 1980. Talk about irony. There was a sign on the side of the building, and you can see it right here in this slide, saying, "This place cooks." So the whole place burned down. The only thing that was not destroyed during the fire was a sign on the Bell Star saying, "This place cooked." And it really did cook that night. Well, when that closed, there was a big old wooden club. Another club became popular called the Long Branch. If you remember that, it was on Jameson Road in Elma. There was also a big old wooden building. What happened there? Caught on fire. It also burned down. Okay. Back in the late 60s, the place to go was the Angola Beach Clubs. Everyone remembers going there. You had Lurzak's, you had Bill Miller's, WMU, Mickey Ratz. Everybody used to go. There's Billy McEwen playing, at the club. And other popular clubs around that time were Bullwinkle's, Keystone 90s. Keystone 90s, of course, ended up becoming After Dark. Down in Grand Island, or in North Tonawanda, across from Grand Island, you had the Wahaki. And you see the bands playing over here. There's a group called the Charles. The Charles was actually John Balby's band before he went on his own to become Dr. Dirty. He was the keyboardist in the band called the Charles. Especially at the Edgewater on Grand Island. It was famous for Tuesday night 25-cent beer night. It was the coldest beer in Western New York. And I'll tell you, the crowds there for the 25% bottled beer, we're not talking about 10-cent drafts here. We're talking about bottled beer, were amazing. There was also another real popular club called He's and She's during the 70s. And that club, if you're going down to 290 at the Colvin exit, there used to be a big whale over there. Okay, well that's where He's and She's was located. But it was originally called Mother Tucker's. And they were forced to change their name because after people had too many drinks, they were mispronouncing what the name of the club was. So they became He's and She's. Here's some of the other popular bands from the 70s. Weekend, Jambo with Kenny Wilczek, Ian Quayle. The lead guitarist from Ian Quayle is the guitarist with the band War right now. And also commercial rock was very, very popular in Buffalo, other than the more rock music that we've been talking about. And the most popular club for commercial rock, of course, was the Executive, which was also the Playboy Club across from the airport on Genesee Street. They'd have music there 7 nights a week. There was always something going on. And you can see here in the poster on the left side, Natalie Cole performed there before she became Natalie Cole, with her group. And a popular band that played there was After Dark. It was led by Jerry Hudson from The Road, and Donna McDaniels was the lead singer. Donna recorded a song that many people remember. In fact, it was written by Tommy Calandra called We're Gonna Win That Cup when the Sabres were making their run for the Stanley Cup. And Donna's still performing now. She became a backup singer for real popular rock bands. She toured with Motley Crue, Billy Idol, and Toad. And of course, at the Executive, Big Wheelie was there on a regular basis. Great friend of mine. He passed away from COVID, unfortunately, but he performed at the club all the time. And of course, Lance Diamond. I met Lance at the Executive, and I'll tell you, he was the hardest working person in rock and roll music. And Buffalo was known for its touring top 40 bands. If you went to any like Holiday Inn or popular commercial rock club in the eastern United States, there's a good chance that the band happened to be from Buffalo. The first group that ended up doing a lot of their touring was a group called United Sound. You can see there on the bottom left. Other popular groups were Trick, National Trust, Sammy Garino's still playing today, Junction West, and UST Topaz, and probably about 20 other really popular bands. Now, during this time, we always talk about music, but of course, there was the wrath of musicians, something called disco. Okay, the first disco club, was a club on Young's Road called Fridays and Saturdays, and later became known as September's, and everybody remembers it, from that. And of course, the Executive had Club 747, and the most popular of all the disco clubs, of course, was Mulligan's. Mulligan's was on Hurdle Avenue, and Mulligan's was the place to go. Like here's a picture of Rick James coming into the club with Linda Blair, and it's Bobby Militello, walking him in because Mulligan's was run by Bobby's brother, Tony. And very popular place. In fact, the back room was known for some white powder And that wasn't a drink, but for some reason people would go get white powder at Mulligan's. I really don't know what that was, but somebody might have an idea. Now, of course, the 70s and 80s, the clubs were packed. Here, look at this line. These were people waiting to get into Uncle Sam's, which is at 2525 Walden Avenue. Here's a picture of the inside of Uncle Sam's. Every place was packed. And undeniably, the most popular rock band at that time was a group called Tallis. Okay. Dave Constantino and Paul Varga got their start in Tweeds, who we ended up showing a picture of playing at the Teen Club. And here's a picture of them. I believe this was taken at the Delaware Avenue Cave, on Delaware Avenue in Tonawanda. And they had a hit called Thing of the Past. Got them a record contract with Decca Records for a contest that they won at the Odd. And Billy Sheehan started back when he was in high school in a band called Opus One. And inside of that group, Teddy Reinhardt and Bruce Ricardo were in the group. They later formed the group Gamelan. Here's a picture of Tallis in the late 70s. And Billy ended up forming a different version of Tallis with Phil Nero, Johnny Angel, and Mark Miller, who you can see there on the right-hand side. And Tallis was the first band inducted into the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame in 1983. And you can see this iconic picture here on the left-hand side. You got Dave Constantino, Billy Sheehan, and Paul Varga, and then there's some handsome guy in the background. God, that looks like me. Okay, well, I was presenting him, inducting him into the Hall of Fame in 1983. And there's a picture of the band playing at a 2012 reunion concert at the Hard Rock Cafe. The most popular rock club in the Buffalo area back in the early 80s was a place called Stage One. And Stage One was owned by Harvey and Corky. And they presented concerts in Buffalo. Very, very great job they did with all the concerts, but I think Harvey Weinstein is known for other things now, and we don't want to talk about that. But Harvey's living in Western New York and in Alden, but he can't leave there, for some reason. They keep him in. But Stage One, every Monday night, Tallis played. And one Monday night, they had a band opening for them. And they just happened to be coming through Buffalo, and it was asked if they could perform there. And there was announcements on the radio that this band called V2, V as in Victory 2, would be opening for Tallis at Stage One. Well, it was actually U2, and it was one of their first appearances in the United States. Ironically, the day that U2 opened for Tallis at Stage One was the day that John Lennon was assassinated in New York City. And the other popular bands from that time, you had Two Hills, you had Actor, Jesse Galante still around the Buffalo area, Cheater, who we mentioned, Bucks, Hangar 19. The shows were amazing that these bands put on. Here's a couple of the other groups, the Vincent Michaels Band, Broken Silence, Tom Gariano from that band still plays with A-List, the Trolls, Ben Hatzel. And I started the Buffalo Music Awards in 1981. And it was an event, try to be like the Grammy Awards for Buffalo, to honor all the musicians. And the first show was held at Rooftops on the Monday before Thanksgiving in 1981. Just look at the bands that performed there. You had Backroads, Ben Hatzel, Cheaters, Strauss Fletcher, Two Hills, Bees, Bucks, Perugia, Tallis, Vincent Michaels. This was a Monday night. All the television stations came out to cover the first Buffalo Music Awards. And we had the spotlights. It was like a fantastic event. There was well over 1,000 people inside of Rooftops, for that show. It was great, great, great night. Okay. 1981 also was when the Continental opened. Continental was known as the, after McVan's, the center for original music in the Buffalo area. Once again, Mark Freeland, he was like the man, along with David Kane. Pauline and the Perils, very popular group. Pauline DeGatti's, I think I'll be doing some dates very soon again in Buffalo. The Restless, they were with a national group. Pine Dogs, Stiff Mitten, Promise, New Toys, great original bands from the Buffalo area. In fact, A lot of the groups, the Goo Goo Dolls, got their start playing at the Continental. In fact, one of the guys from the band was a barback at the Continental before they ended up becoming, the Goo Goo Dolls. Cannibal Corpse is the main, because they death metal rock from in the world. They were from Buffalo. 10,000 Maniacs actually were from Jamestown. They played early shows. Here's a picture of them playing a dance inside of some basement club. And of course, Ani DeFranco. These were original people from Buffalo in the early 80s that ended up making it nationally and putting Buffalo on the map. And there was a dichotomy. In the suburbs, the bands were all playing cover songs. In the city, the bands were more playing original music. So you had the original scene at McVan's in the Continental and the cover scene at clubs in the suburbs like the Barrelhead, He's and She's. I go really deeply into that inside the book, History of Buffalo Music and Entertainment, on the different types of bands and in different types of areas and such. Now, country was also popular in the late 80s. I'd mentioned Stone Country. Dwayne Hall, who owns the Sportsman's Grill, best honky tonk in the United States, actually won that national recognition for that. He ended up putting on a festival called Sunshine 1980. It was a 3-day event with all sorts of country bands playing. It's a huge, huge turnout. It was out in Akron. Other country bands from that time period, you can see them here, like the Pointless Brothers, Erie Lackawanna Railroad, J.C. Thompson. In fact, the band J.C. Thompson uh, and Keith Allen Cross Country Express, a lot of the members from those groups ended up becoming in the Boys of Summer, popular today. And of course, we mentioned Ramblin' Lou for our shows. Here's Ramblin' Lou and his family, along with Ed Bentley, who was a rockabilly guy, and Ernie Weber, who was really, the father of bluegrass in the Western area. Plus, you can't forget blues. Blues was huge in the Elmwood area and Hurdle. And the man was Shakin' Smith. That Shakes there on the left-hand side. He was considered one of the top harmonica players in the country. In fact, the Hohner Harmonicas put out a calendar with all the top harmonica players. He was the only person that wasn't nationally known that was on there because he was that good. Tommy Z's like one of your main blues guys right now. Here you have Willie and the Reinhardts and the Electras and the Buffalo Blues Band. Blues is huge in Buffalo. Now, back in these days, the bands constantly worked. Here's a listing from Buffalo Backstage Magazine showing all the clubs in the Western New York area. There were clubs all over the place. Now, here's the calendar for the Tweeds. The Tweeds had to beg their booking agent, which was Starstruck Productions. People out there from the music community, definitely remember Freddie Caserta. Mike, who was there, also is Metal Blade Records in California, and Tom Barone was part of that. And Tom's the person that owned the Trelf. Unfortunately, the Trelf's going to be closing and moving to another location. But the Tweeds did so much work, they had to ask like 2 or 3 months in advance just to have a day off. Okay. Other popular 80s bands, females became more popular in the groups that we're in, like we had the group Widow and Watchers, Actor, and of course the Trolls were, really big in that time. Other groups, we had Gamelan, White Lies. Here's when it was all the hair bands. There's so much hair in this picture, that, it's like being on early MTV, but unfortunately, the rock scene started to decline in the late 1980s. It declined because of a multitude of different reasons. One is the drinking age increased to the age of 19. And then 2 years later, the drinking age increased to the age of 21. I actually remember meeting some people that said they turned legal 3 times. Okay. Of course, the DWI laws were enforced more. Plus, the other thing is the baby boom. People were not going to the clubs anymore. All those baby boomers were getting older. We weren't going out as much. A lot of people moved out of Western New York. These were the days when Bethlehem Steel ended up leaving here, and clubs cut back on the nights of entertainment. Clubs started closing. Here's an example. This is a listing of former live music clubs that existed just in Cheektowaga. They're all gone. They're really not around anymore. I believe the Four Stallions might have music, one day a year, but all the other clubs, other than Polish Villa 2, they don't exist anymore. It's really unfortunate. So what are people doing now for entertainment? People for entertainment now, and we can start doing this again because COVID finally is ending. Okay. People are going to be going to all the outdoor events, such as Larkinville. Larkinville is going to be back. The Gateway concerts. This is a picture of Gateway. And we're going to have probably 3,000 people at our show this Wednesday. Art Park's going to be having shows again. Canal Side might not be having as much, because they're going to be moving the concerts to the outer harbor and all the town parks. But what's interesting is the bands that the people are going to see at these outdoor events are the type of music that we've been talking about during this presentation. It's bands playing music from the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. The picture you can see here, that's Nerds Gone Wild. If you haven't seen Nerds Gone Wild, it's like going to, the new wave MTV time during 1980s. Everybody's, really enjoying all that type of music. In fact, speaking of Gateway, God, how did this come here? Here's our schedule for this year. You can go to townandwindusgatewayharbor.com to be able to get the schedule. I thank everybody very much and hope you enjoyed the presentation. And if you have read my books, History of Buffalo Entertainment, along with Profiles Volume 1, Historic and Influential People from Buffalo, New York, and Western New York from the 1980s, is available at gift shops, bookstores, online on my webpage, buffalomusichistory.com, on Amazon. Get yourself a copy. I know that you'll enjoy it. And if anybody has any questions, Katie, are there questions there?
Thank you, Rick. Wow, what fun. Thank you so much. We have quite a few things that came through. So let me just start reading them because we have a lot of comments. It looks like you brought up a lot of memories for people, which is awesome.
I'm glad I remembered what I was talking about, so that's good.
Yeah, no pressure, right? Okay, so we have Gary. He used to dance at the Delwood Ballroom to the Clings.
Aha.
Very cool. They also received WKBW on a Virginia vacation.
I think there's something where KB was actually picked up in Newfoundland, so this station went all over the place. I can't believe Danny and Joey didn't bring the Beatles to Buffalo.
Yeah. Let's see, we have Tommy Shannon was DJ at several of our dances at DeSales High School in the early 60s. Great guy, enjoying your presentation.
Thank you. In fact, person knows Tommy Shannon passed away, like within the month in California.
Oh,
And at our street dance at Gateway 2 years, we did a tribute to the Rockin' Rebels for the song Wild Weekend. And Tommy Shannon actually recorded from California the introduction to the band. Tommy was a great guy. Type person, you met him once, you loved him.
oh, those people are the best. Let's see. We have Jim Santella at the meeting. They wanted to let you know that.
Okay, Jim Santella, anybody out there? Jim Santella is the father of progressive rock radio. He was disc jockey at WYSL, and he's got a book out that he wrote about his days in radio. Jim, glad you made it to hear this.
There you go. It says, let's see, yep, Jim Santella's listening. He is a BMHOF member. He's the DJ who introduced V2 at stage 1. He got a backstage music award in 1982. Very cool.
And he's a member of the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame and a member of the Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
Hey, awesome. Well, we're glad he's here too. Let's see, we have very fun. My husband was in the Cavemen. It was fun to hear names of people he jammed with.
The lead singer from the Cavemen is still doing car shows down in Virginia where he lives. He's a Facebook friend of mine, and we always keep in touch.
Oh, really cool. And so this comment, so the Trough isn't closing, it will reopen elsewhere. Do you happen to know where, Rick?
Yes. Supposedly it's going to be, well, it's closing in the location where it's been all the time in Cedar Place. But from what I heard, it's going to be reopening on Genesee Street. And 12th's very important, with jazz and touring bands and everything like that. And the person that, from what I've heard, is running it now, Tom Barone, who I mentioned, he's going to be the one that's going to be reopening it. And one person that works with him is Jeremy, who's a lead singer in Strictly Hip. So he works along with Tom Barone. So I can't wait till they get their new location. They're dear friends of mine.
Oh, very neat. Let's see, we have somebody that saw Jeff Beck at Bell Star unannounced.
Uh-huh.
Pretty neat. We have my Toronto-born husband picked up KB in Cuba.
And it's not Cuba, New York, I trust. I'm sure it's Fidel's Cuba.
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming, let's see. Somebody says Bobby DeSoto and the Rockets. I think this says were not mentioned.
Yes, I couldn't mention everybody. If you go into the book, he was one of the top people from the 1950s. I have information on him and what he recorded during the 50s and others. I just happened to pick out the Tune Rockers because they were the ones that had the first hit.
Mhm. There's only so much time, right, Rick?
I know. And my time's running out. I'm 70 now. No, no, I shouldn't say that.
Heck no, we need you to keep doing this. All right, let's see here. We have Bill Sheen went on the Van Halen. Maybe that makes sense to you.
Say that again.
Bill Sheen dash went on the Van Halen.
Oh yeah, okay. Billy Sheehan was a member of Tallis, and he was actually in Mr. Big. And Billy never was a member of Van Halen, but he did play in David Lee Roth band along with Stevie Vai. Okay, but he was very close with the guys from Van Halen because Tallis actually did a U.S. tour opening for Van Halen.
Thank you, Rick. We've got a couple more minutes here and a couple more things. So I'm seeing we enjoyed your first book and are looking forward to your next. Did you know Robbie Tackick interned with Jim at WUW?
I think what that is Robbie from the Goo Goo Dolls. Okay, he interned to KB. I did not know that. Interesting.
Pretty cool. Apologies, I butchered that last name. Let's see, we have no mention of the Cintas who got their start at the Executive. Frankie Cinta entertains now in Las Vegas.
Right, the Shintas, really, if you take all the people from Buffalo, even like recording acts, the band that has probably made the most money is the Shintas. They ended up signing $1 million contract to be able to perform in Vegas. And I believe they're finally, playing again out that way. And hopefully they'll be back to Buffalo. They used to be the headliners at the Italian Festival every year. And I think they might be back at the casino, this year. Amazing performers. I remember when they got inducted into the Buffalo Music Hall of Fame. There was an event that was held at the 12th. They started playing, and everybody was like in awe. They were so fantastic. Fantastic performers, and people also they always say they're from Buffalo. Wherever they go, they say they're from Buffalo.
They're proud of that. That's wonderful. Let's see, I'm seeing that 7-Eleven needs a plaque or something to commemorate Jimi Hendrix, don't you think?
They should. That I've actually spoken with the family of Joe T. Rose, who owned it, and a plaque has to be put there that Jimi Hendrix performed at that location. Like you see the plaques, commemorative of what happened at a certain place. It would be important for that, to be, on Niagara Street right here in Buffalo, that Jimi Hendrix performed there. I agree. And it's something that people have talked about, but we're not getting any place. Well, maybe COVID held us up because we were talking about that before COVID. So give us some time. Maybe that will happen. Okay.
All right, we'll report back. And the last thing I'm seeing is I love this walk down memory lane.
And I loved being able to give the talk. It was so much fun, being able to do this. And I'm looking forward to, again, returning to in-person presentations because I know University Express come in the fall. we'll be going back to in-person talks at all the different community centers around Western New York. I'm really looking forward to doing that, plus returning to doing talks at libraries and many other places. And I'm enjoying writing my next book. In fact, yesterday I ended up. God, who did I write yesterday? I don't even remember. Well, doing everybody from the early 1900s. And the person I wrote yesterday was Frank Baird, who's considered the father of the Peace Bridge. And what I'm really enjoying is I'm finding relatives, nephews, grandchildren, and even people that work with the people that I'm writing about. And they're going into and reading over what I'm writing. So I'm having so much fun writing the book on the early 1900s. I can't wait till that comes out in the fall.
We can't either, Rick, and actually a couple more things came in here. So this is a question or comment. It says, Rick, thank you. This was terrific. Do you know if Tom Geraci is coming home this summer to play with his current band? He founded Crossroads, which became the Bees.
I have not heard if Tom's coming back this year. You know, if he does come back, he usually does our Woodstock reunion thing at Gateway. But I haven't heard from Tom, since COVID.
All right, thanks for that, Rick. And now I'm just saying thank you for a wonderful presentation. And thank you so much fun. Looking forward to live music again. So, Rick, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
You're awesome. And thanks to everyone who was on. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.